to do a masking tape workshop. I'm doing the workshop. Yeah, you'll be watching. Unfortunately, we can't do this interactively. Maybe that's for next time. I've been inspired to put this together because I do a workshop, face-to-face workshop, which we nickname the Box Workshop, where people come and get my sort of tips and tricks for furniture painting, what I call modern furniture painting, so smooth finish, and then learn geometric masking tape designs and how to do that from me. And at the end, of course, they get to take a nice box home rather than just sample sticks. And I'd like to take that elsewhere. It's not happened yet. Obviously I'm busy making furniture as well, but hopefully, perhaps later this year in the new year, that will happen. But what I really wanted to do was to go through some of the things that I talk about when I'm talking about the masking tape technique in that workshop. Get it into a video, because every time somebody says to me, well, you can bring it near to me, or when you do an online workshop, I feel I just wish I had something that I could give you. So here it is. I thought I'd get something on video and show you what it's all about. So I'm not going to do a box, just to show you what that is all about. I'm going to do a table. So this is the sort of thing I'm going to do, but obviously on a slightly bigger scale. So I'm going to do a piece of furniture for you today. The box is a very simple wooden box. It usually has hinges and a lock. And in the workshop we paint the outside using Fusion Mineral Paint. So it's a great way of showing off the qualities of the paint and then moving on to doing a design on the lid. So as I said, it's a lovely workshop. Just you've got a nice takeaway from it, but you can learn lots of different techniques that you can apply afterwards to furniture upcycling yourself. And I usually always demo this particular design because it's eye-catching, but it's really simple. It introduces you to some of the techniques of cutting masking tape. There's no measuring needed at all, believe it or not. I don't do very much measuring, not very much, in my work. I'm not scientific or mathematical at all. Just to reassure you, it's not something that I'm going to be making you do nano measurements to do. I'm hoping this will be the first of a series of get more detailed and do finer patterns in some other videos, but still I'll show you the techniques I use are not scientific. It's using the eye, what feels right. Pieces of furniture are all different shapes and sizes. Some of them have warped, and I think it's good to judge it by eye, because then that's what looks pleasing to the eye, rather than being too mathematical about it, because sometimes you can find things are slightly off. You want to work with the piece you've got. Now obviously for this workshop that I teach mostly in Leeds at the moment, we're working on what is a brand new box. So I talk about the theory of furniture painting. And so I'm not really going to go into a lot around the theory of prepping or painting furniture. That's for other videos. What I'm going to stick to talking about here is getting straight down to the masking tape. You could call this a masking tape 101, because I'm going to keep it quite simple in terms of I'm not going to be cutting the tape into different sort of widths. I'm going to work with the tape as it is, but talk to you about my techniques for getting a really crisp finish as is. And then, it's a good place to start, and then build out from there. So this is the design I'm going to do. Nice and simple. I can switch this up, and I don't know, I'm a bit undecided actually. You could switch this up if you wanted to, by putting different colours in these stripes, because obviously I'm going to be doing this table here, so let's move that out of the way, which is going to give me a lot more of the chevrons. So I will actually, let's go back to that a second, I'll actually end up with many more chevrons on my table because it's bigger. So I've started off by prepping this fully, and I've given it 3 coats of Fusion Mineral Paint. So I've used coal black, so you can see that there. Now you might notice it's a little dusty from your point of view, because I've given it a last sand before I put the design on, because I will top coat. I like to top coat over everything, so it gives you one surface that unifies. If you're wiping, you don't want your cloth sticking on a design, or actually scratching the design. So I like to go over the top. So this will all come back to life once it's all sealed at the end. So I'm just going to go ahead and start putting the design on. It's exactly the same technique as if I'd done this on a stripped table. There's just some little different considerations, which I'll go into another video, but because I've got a very flat, it's pretty much non-porous surface, there's no, well there is actually a discernible wood grain, you can see it because it's quite a grainy wood, but it's not an open grain of a natural wood, so I don't need to worry about how the tape's going to be on top of that as a surface. Open wood grains kind of sometimes allow the paint to sneak in a little bit, so we have to think about things a bit differently. But yeah, I'll cover that in a different video, because this one is about taping over a painted surface, which is what we do in the workshops. Because the box is like raw pine, it lends itself to being painted. It doesn't look particularly great. It doesn't feel particularly great with, with just a raw surface and the paint at the top. So I always use frog tape. It's not to say that I haven't been trying other tapes out recently. I'm always keen to make sure I'm using the cheapest, most effective, best thing, combination of all those things. I don't believe in spending more than you need to, but at the same time, I think buying something cheaply is a false economy. So I've been through the hardship of using the best tape, thinking, "Ooh, my technique it's good now." So I'm going to switch my tape back to something a bit cheaper because I've mastered this. And yeah, that doesn't necessarily work out. That I got bitten on the bum by that because the tape doesn't have the technology. So there are other tapes that I'm trying. So keep an eye on my feeds, on my Facebook and Instagram, because if I find a tape that is as foolproof as this, I'll be shouting about it, assuming it's more cost effective. So frog tape is the one that I rely on the most. There's another tape by 3M, which is Edgelock, which is pretty good too. I find this easy to work with simply and I've been doing tests recently as well, so I can say that with confidence. This is a good colour to contrast against a lot of things. If you've got a very pale surface, you might want to maybe think about using it because it's blue. I found it quite difficult against wood, being blue with orange writing on it. I found it quite hard to see the minuteness of the cuts and making sure they're lined up, because it's really important that you line everything up perfectly. Paint is very unforgiving when it comes to masking tape, so you have to be quite detailed about it. So the yellow for me is the most reliable and the easiest to work with. Some of the other tapes are a little bit waxy on the top. This one's not too waxy, so your blade doesn't slip, and it's easy to cut through. This is the delicate surfaces, so this is for painted surfaces, perfect. But I'm using Fusion Mineral Paint as well, and Fusion Mineral Paint is a very grippy paint, so I think it would be okay probably with the green tape, but I still wouldn't use it. I'd use this, low attack, no chance of any of the stickiness coming off. I also use this over wood as well. Newly stripped wood is a bit delicate, especially on vintage furniture. A lot of it's veneer, and even this sometimes can pull fibres of the wood off, so I go low tack, and make sure it's well stuck down. So it's not that green hasn't got its place, but I think this is the best one to go for. Play it safe. So these canisters are quite useful for keeping your nuts and bolts in, and handles and things. So when it comes to something like this, I'm going to do just a little reminder. You see I've got a crisscross pattern like this. So I really just need to start off with two pieces crisscrossing, which will mask off literally the black. And then I'm going to paint my paint in these channels. So it's literally a sort of stripe but converging in a cross. There are more complicated versions of this pattern where you can bring these 2 points together, but that involves sort of doing it in a certain way. So this is just nice and easy for getting started. Build up as you go along. You could, as over time you could start to cut into these. You could create smaller channels, but I think it's good to get something simple right straight away and work it out from there. So get the technique right was what I'd say. And what I also say in my workshops is you could start to follow what I'm doing. You could have a go at cutting some chevrons and then just freestyle. Just go off a bit, fill one of the other sections in with stripes. You'll see it when I start to lay it out. Just go off on a tangent if you want to. This is a lovely technique for experimenting and just letting it happen. As long as it's pleasing to the eye, to your eye while you're doing it, why not? I would say a lot of the times if I'm doing a pattern that I've never done before, I don't know what it's going to look like when it comes out. You have a good instinct as you go along, but I really don't know for sure how I'm going to go, ooh, I love it. now I'm doing more and more patterns as sort of a repeat pattern. Yeah, of course I do. And that's why when people get a little bit, I mean, I'm a sort of person that would think about something a bit too much and then get in the way of myself and think, oh, I don't know which pattern to do. Sometimes in the workshop I say to people, get a pen and paper, pencil and paper and sketch it out and try and do the line drawing, remembering that you're masking around the shape that you want to make. So if you want to do a square, you would mask around the square and leave it as a negative space that you have to fill in. So you have to sort of think a little bit backwards when you're doing it this way. And I should also point out that in this particular example, in this sort of 101 workshop, all I'm doing is putting tape on, filling in the paint and taking the tape off. There are more complex techniques where you might have two colours butting up against each other. So I might want to then infill with pink here, which means I have to take the tape off and retape to allow a channel of pink to go in next to the gold. Because when any colours butt up to each other, except for using this particular technique where I've done one solid colour and I'm doing a separate additional colour straight over the top, you have to do more than one taping. So this is going to be a one tape only, which is really nice, works really well in the workshop because you've only got so long. You've got to paint the whole box 2-3 coats, get the tape on, paint it, and do a couple of coats then and get the tape off as well. So we tend to go for all over and then one taping session only. So there's plenty you can do to sort of play around with that sort of technique as you go along. Okay, so let's get cracking and start masking. So key tools for this are a ruler, and it doesn't need to be this big for this one particularly because all I'm doing is cutting the ends of 2 points, so it can be quite small. This is the one I use the most, and what I like about this is actually from cutting that, so it's got a cutting tool on it, just ignore that. What I like about it is it's really brittle plastic, which means it doesn't happen very often that I cut into it. In fact, I don't think it's ever happened. The shatterproof, softer plastic ones, you can cut them, which is kind of fine, but then you've got to then find the line that you cut out of to carry on again. So that can be a bit annoying. And metal ones are good. Obviously they don't have that problem, but the problem with metal ones is it's quite hard to see and line up because you could have gone over the line and not got the sort of the right line that you need. So clear is good because you can actually see the elements of the tape lining up, make sure everything's perfect. So anyway, we'll see that as we go. So let's get the end of this. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm just literally going to lay my first tape lines on. Now I think the first question would be, how are you going to find the centre? I'm not. This might trip me up. No, I'm joking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go from one side to the other with a piece of tape, and then the other piece of tape I will form the cross. But really, you can't really go wrong. All you're going to do is make yourself sort of a shallower set of chevrons. So these would sort of, the angle of this here would change depending on how you cross the other tape. Let's make that happen and then you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to go across. I'm going to take, sorry, I have a bad habit of using my teeth for this, but it's a lot more effective than stopping. So I'm going to visually find the middle. And as I say, I do a lot by eye. So that's visually in the middle. And just to make sure it goes down the sides enough as well, haven't I? Sometimes I forget to do that. Okay, so if you wanted to censure check that, you could actually measure if you wanted to. And that's about right, so that's good, isn't it? But once this has got an amazing optical effect on, when I've finished, no one's going to be going, oh, that's 2 millimetres out. That's what I'm saying, have fun with it, let's get too narrow about it. So what I'm going to do now is get another piece, and I'm going to make sure it's long enough this time. And I'm going to cross over this piece and just make sure I've got a nice, what you want to do is make sure you've got a nice sort of shape there. So it's really down to you to decide, do I want shallower chevrons here, wider ones there? This is obviously a bit different from the box. When I do the box, I have the ability to literally go corner to corner. So it's lovely and simple for people to get started, to have a framework that their chevrons are the same in each section. But here, I've got a bit of flexibility, so I'm going to try and make it a bit more even. So, so. And again, I'm just using my eye really. Let's see that I'm just, you can take it off a few times, it's not a problem. Just going to turn the tape around, just give myself a bit of a sense check that that's in the right place. No, it's not. So yeah, I mean, feel free to sort of measure around properly if you wanted to do it that way, but that's, play around so it feels balanced basically. And just peel those off and put them back down again. By the end, really good. I'm pretty happy with that. If you want to start doing measurements now, sort of check your positioning, then it's a bit easier then just to reposition it. So I'm just doing it by eye, like I said. And the most I ever do on my furniture is probably measure the central point. So if I'm doing a diamond, measure the middle of a drawer, so that I can fit the sort of the tape and make sure that it is a really even diamond shape. I think visually, if shapes like that, like this shape here, is symmetrical, you know that the tapes are lined up. So let's start to put in the chevron. So a neat way of doing it, obviously I'm going to get used to the width of the tape and be quite good at gauging it, but a neat way of doing it is take a bit of tape, and this works for any width of tape. So if you want to make consistently small lines, well, small channels I was going to say, but thin lines, this tape would be smaller than this. But obviously I want to make consistently wide stripes, the same width as the tape. This is the bits you have to watch. These bits have to be perfectly wrapped underneath. So I'm just going to angle it. So as I say, you can pick up these bits of tape and angle them. And I'm just making sure I get a really good match with this bit of tape. So I'm picking it up. And because if you've ever worked masking tape before, you'll know it lies to you. It bends. So if I try and follow the straight line or something, I'll show you actually. I'll demo that in a second. You can just angle it with your hand. So I'll just show you this. If I was to take a piece of tape, this is probably going to work straight away actually. Yeah, it has. But sometimes you put tape down and it doesn't line up perfectly. So what you need to do, if you wanted to get something to line up, it's the same as when you're taping up off the edge of a cabinet or something, is if you're trying to match it up, is angle it like that and smooth it along till you get exactly the right match, like so. I find that's a lot easier. You don't need that piece. That might be too short for anything we need as well. So I'll move that piece of guide tape. I'm going to move it around here because what I'm doing is creating a chevron here. This is where the paint will go. And put that in there. And then, doesn't matter how much it overlaps over here, I'm just going to make sure it matches up. And then I might move that actually. You do, like I say, you do get used to the width of things, but particularly with narrow stuff, it's amazing how your eyes can lie to you. So it is actually quite a good idea to keep, just when you're 1 mil off, you can actually see it in the paint. So it's a good idea to, and if it's a narrower gap, I'll just lay a bit of tape in the gap, cut it, and then I've got a little tiny piece of tape that then I can move around. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on expensive hobby tapes. Like I used to use I still do to be fair, the modelling tapes that you use for Airfix models and stuff. They just come in such small rolls and they're just so expensive. So I've started more and more using a cutting mat to cut exactly the widths that I want as I go instead. So, right, so I'm just going to, let's move that up a little bit. Just going to rub that down really well there so I get a really nice close view of where the line. This is the bit here that I need this line to be perfect. So where I cut through this tape that's overlapped, if that's not perfect and it sort of slightly deviates and goes up, that's what will happen in my paint line. So if you've ever done it before, you thought, oh, it's not a perfect straight line, that has to be precise. And I won't lie that it's easy. Good light is really important, and I do think a clear ruler does help. So I'm just going to rub it down so I can see it, get right over the top of it. There's my, that's the blade that I prefer in terms of cutting. Make sure it's really sharp, and then I'll just do a very light cut. Now it's not so problematic if you do cut through to the paint, because the paint's going to actually be in that groove. It's going to fill that in, and it won't be an issue. But the reason I try and be gentle with it is, unlike something like this that's fairly straightforward, when you're doing something experimenting, you want to move the tape, so you don't want lots of scratches, particularly across the grain. So just take it gently, don't push too hard. What I would say is the technique is line it up really well, push hard on the ruler, lightly on the blade. That would be the best way to do it. Keep your fingers out the way. Then I'm just going to pull off the excess there, like that, and then we'll do the other side. So we'll do the same. Make sure it's perfectly lined up, and again quite lightly. Just take that off there. I'm always very careful when I'm taking tape up as well. I'll always gently and then use the pad of my finger to roll it back, because it's too easy, especially when you've been working. We do this in a workshop in a very quick scenario. We've just literally hair dried the paint and then we're on with the tape. And the last thing I want to do is scratch it off. Now this has been curing for quite a while before I've done it, but it can happen. So just pull the edge of the tape up. You can even pull it away from the corner. If you don't even go right to the corner, you can pull it back from the corner. And just use your pad of your finger. And you won't get any unwanted gouges in your paint. So I think that's about okay. So you can see we've got one chevron on, and so we can move around, and it's just the same. I think I've just got rid of my bit of guide tape. But let's stay on doing the same one. I'm going to do them all. You feel free to fast forward through it, but it's good to see the methodology. There's and this is what I was saying at this point. My workshoppers sometimes think, oh right, I'm going to start freestyling some of these other sections. Now I've got a sort of an idea of some of the basics. They might cut into the tape, they might cut out some of the sections, and that's where the fun starts really. And what the lovely thing about that is, every pattern is unique, and afterwards, I mean, even I can't work out how they've come about those patterns, because it just evolves. So that's the nice thing about it. Once you feel confident you can get a good crisp result, it's easy to play, I think. So don't worry about, once you've got these tips mastered, you won't have to worry about bleeding, you won't have to worry about paint lifting off. This is a good point to say to you, go and watch my prep video. I'm just going to watch these corners. I don't want it to go off at an angle, so I want that to be quite straight, which means I might have to retape that to get another line there, but we'll come back to that anyway. If you haven't already seen it, my prep video, because if you've read my top, is it 5 or 10? My masking tape tips guide, anyway, it's the free guide on my website, and prep. If you're going to do masking tape designs, you have to get your prep right, because, and I've tested it other ways. I've actually got a set of these tables, and I've tested it without cleaning, tested it out with sanding, and pretty much without fail, your paint's going to rip off. The recipe is cleaning, sanding, and a good paint that adheres well to the surface. So you need it to be clean, no grease. You need the surface not to be shiny so that the paint can stick, so it's got a good key. You need the paint itself not to be, so you wouldn't use an emulsion. You need to use a good, strong paint that's, you know, meant to be used on furniture, so it's got a lot more gripping qualities. And I would say, I'm not an expert, but I would say it might be more difficult with chalk paint, potentially. And I'm willing to be proven wrong on that, but it's not as tough as other paints until you've got your top coat on. So what I love about Fusion is top coat's built in, That is completely scrubbable, splash proof and tough by itself without a top coat. So how perfect for putting masking tape on top of. Other paints are a bit more porous, they're not sealed yet. I'm not quite sure how I don't think I want to go there. But you know, it'd be good to do some tests on it at some point, but I found a recipe that really works for me. And the thing about my workshop is I want to take that to other people. I want to make them enjoy it straight away because I didn't. I had a lot of blood, sweat and tears with it because I was wanting to do something that wasn't particularly fashionable at the time. I wanted to do a modern finish, as I call it. I wanted to do smooth painting and not many people doing that, if any, that I was aware of. And now there's quite a lot of us doing it, but there was no workshops. So I had to learn by making a lot of mistakes and a lot of putting stuff on and taking it off again. So that's why my workshops mean so much to me, because I want other people to enjoy it. And not to go home in the day thinking, I hate this, why am I doing this? Furniture painting sucks. It's because I was, pushing the boundaries and trying new things, so. Okay. Oh, that's very short. You don't have to spend a lot on these knives. They're only, I think they're about £3 or £4. You usually get a few replaceable blades with them, maybe 5 or 6 if that. But I buy most of my stuff on Amazon or eBay, to be honest. Hobbycraft if I'm really desperate, but it's a bit more expensive. So I keep throwing away my little bit of guide tape. So the really key bit, when I get to the end, is that I'm going to give this a really good rubbing. Make sure that tape is really stuck down. Now this is interesting because I don't do tables that much. I do a lot of obviously square mid-century furniture. To think about how these stripes go round. Either that or I'll just mask the edge off and then we won't have to worry about it. These are the decisions you make as you go along. When you're doing furniture, they say the piece speaks to you. Yeah, sometimes it tells you. It doesn't speak to you. You have to make the decisions. So it may be that just for the ease of this, that I just go around, just do the pat on the top. I wonder if I might start to get some paint on. I'll just keep going. So making sure all of those line perfectly up. And here's a little tip I find very useful. I'm coming close. So where these overlap, this is where you really need to make sure you've rubbed it down as well. Make sure it's really rubbed down. You see that little tiny overlap? That could make my line look less straight. Crazy. So I actually get hold of the tape and just pull it back so that the top tape is just a little bit pushed in. I don't know if you can see that. Show it again here. Just pull it in a little bit like that so it's not sitting in the sort of channel where the paint would go, because that's the kind of thing that could force the paint just to show a little dink in the line. So I just do that sometimes when I've got, there's one there actually. Let's see there, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but that potentially could just, and do you know, you'd think to yourself, oh my goodness, how detailed is that? But it does make a difference. It does make a difference if you want really nice crisp lines. So I'm going to do the rest of the masking and then we'll move on to the painting bit. And I give you my tips for painting it and getting a really nice effect and hopefully not pushing the paint under the tape. Another little tip for you that came up in my workshop last night, so I'll pass it along because it's something that I've picked up over time, is to cut the excess tape away as you go. So this is something that might come out in one of the more advanced videos when I'm doing something where more tapes converge than here, but I have noticed it on my workshops that it's really easy to get confused about which line belongs to which and where you're intending the paint to be. So if you sort of clean up as you go, I can do it too if I don't, sometimes plus what you also don't want is a build-up of tape. 2 tapes together is enough to cut really. You can do more than that, but there's a good chance that you're going to make a less clean edge. So yeah, we were talking about that last night and I said, yeah, it's a good idea to keep on top of it because you just get befuddled and then you realise you painted the wrong bit from what you intended. And obviously, you know, in our workshops, that's just part of the fun, it's okay. But if you're doing something where you've got a specific idea in mind and, you know, if I painted the wrong stripe, for example, here it would make a difference. So one other thing also to tell you, that's just popped in my head, is really good reason why frog tape comes in a box. If you work, I mean I don't very often sit here civilised working at a table and chairs, I'm usually on the floor. If you've ever seen me do any of my videos, I'm on the floor, the workshop floor, which is obviously covered in workshop stuff. The times that I've put this on the floor and it picks up dust and stuff on the edge there, that gives you a fluffier edge, and that can affect anything that you see underneath your tape. You need to pull it out. You need to get that out. Even if you get it off, sometimes it just has a bit of a fluffy edge, and you see that it's a bit creped or fluffy. Use the other edge as your leading edge if you're doing it. You know, unless you're doing stripes like this, just get rid of the tape. That's why I try and keep the box open on the floor, put the tape back in it, because that edge there is really important in getting your crisp edge. You know, so there's a method in their madness for that. But anyway, if you buy another brand of tape, just try and keep it off the floor or off a dusty surface so that you've got nothing. And that's a really key thing to say, you know, I was saying, but if you've got any bits, if you see just a little speck, you know, you've got to have it all really rubbed down so well that you've got to be sure that it's not going to sneak in, basically. Little creases, some little creases you can scrape them flat, but you need to get them flat. Sometimes I do use, if I can see a little deviation in my cut, I might just use my nail to rub it to make it smooth, so I know that it's going to be a smooth line. One thing that's quite useful when you're remove those, making these chevrons is checking that these shapes here are symmetrical and the points line up. So you can see, obviously that keeping that guide there keeps it same, but just to make sure that where they overlap is the neat symmetrical shape. If that's an even shape, you know that you've not sort of gone off at one side. You should be able to see a nice sort of symmetry. It's all about pleasing to the eye with geometrics. I mean, like I said, I'm not mathematical, so really it's about sort of making the eye go, ooh, I like that. You know, it's often what jars to my eye is when you see lots of varying angles, you know, it's like different shaped diamonds, or, you know, what's really lovely about geometric patterns, I think that's what appeals, is that pure symmetry. So I don't like to sort of vary up different shapes on one piece. I like to make them harmonious. There you go. Okay, so we're ready to paint now. Really important thing for you to do is to rub the tape really well. So here's a couple of examples where you can see tapes overlapping. We mentioned before, let's really rub it down. Let's have a look at this. See here? If I just rub that down, you see how it gets a bit darker? That's what you're going to be seeing. Then you know it's rubbed down. Only along the edge that you're actually going to be painting, but in this instance I'm painting both, so I need to make sure it goes darker. So that I know that it's really stuck down, and then you want to make sure that these edges here are really rubbed down well too. So you want to be a little bit particular, rubbing it down. Some people use a card or something to read you that. I just use my fingers, but it's really quite important. The friction, I think, as well does help seal those edges. So I'm going to go around all of that. Anything that needs a bit of attention, I think. Yeah, and then I'm just going to mask off the edge. So we'll do that very quickly. Manage my tape. So we'll just, I think for the purpose of this, I'm not going to try and worry about all those stripes going perfectly around the edge. Instead, I'm just going to mask it off for now. And do it little bit by little bit. You sort of ease it round the curve. And of course, I want to get that really rubbed down well as well. When it gets a little bit difficult to match the curve, I'll just rip it off. And then start again. But make sure that I really line it up perfectly over the top of the previous bit of tape. Making sure I get those folds around the edge perfectly as well. I don't want any little overlaps to paint to sneak in. Just lining it up with the edge as perfect as I can. So, go this way. This is where the eyes are really important. There's a little bit of give in the tape. It said it doesn't do a straight line, you've got to kind of guide it, so you can and handled it around the curves to a certain extent. I'm just going to rub it down. Just going to take that off. Eventually just get to a point where you've bent it as much as you can. You need to start again. Nearly there. This is what I do in the workshop. I say to people they can carry the pattern on down the sides if they want to, or you can just mask off around the edges. Just a personal choice. So get that as precise as I can. A bit less light around here, so just making sure that it's spot on. Any little wrinkles, get them, that's not quite overlapped as I like it. It needs to feel like it's one piece, continuous piece. So. Okay. And less rubbing. Lots of rubbing. Okay. So, the last, well, there's probably two last bits of technique actually. The next one comes with the painting, I think, and then the other one comes with the removal of the tape. So I'm going to be painting mine. I've decided to go for pearl, which is Fusion Metallics pearl, which itself is quite sheer. So I'm thinking what I'll do is I'll put just a base layer of casement, which is the one of the whites in the range, down first, and then that will help build a layer for the metallic to go on top of. So what I use, if I'm doing something like this, I mean if I was doing something, you know, with a bigger masked off area like colour blocking, I might use a bigger brush, but I generally use a 1 inch artist brush like that. It's really soft, it's like a little watercolour brush, and it's really good for filling in detail, and it's really nice because it's short, so it's easy to control as well. So let's go in with that. Now obviously when you look at this you think, oh, I could just like roller across the whole thing or paint across the whole thing. I find with that there's more chance of you potentially pushing paint under the tape. So I suggest painting it by hand, each particular area. And what I've developed as a technique is, so I'll just get a little bit of paint on my brush, is I paint along the lines first. Later on it doesn't matter so much. But I feel that this, so if I was doing a big triangle, I'd still paint along the lines and then I'd fill it in. So I find that this gives me a chance for the tape to seal with the paint, and then I can smooth it out in the direction I want later on. So I'm just going to sort of tease it over the painted edge instead of pushing it towards the tape and going along the tape lines. And I'll just show you I'll smooth it out afterwards, but obviously this is the first coat, so the first coat might look a bit see-through and a bit rough, and as it builds up it'll look better and better. So I'm making sure that I'm pushing it as well, because you can obviously leave a little bit of a gap between the paint and the tape, so just smoothing it on, but smoothing it down the edge as well so that you don't end up with a build of paint, because that's what can happen when you go across the way, you get a ridge of paint. So by doing it this way, everything looks a little bit flatter and smoother. So obviously this is not going to look completely opaque at this point because it's white. I'm just trying to get rid of as much of the excess paint as possible. Just show you that. So I don't know if you can see that, but it is literally just smoothing it down the the tape lines, but not allowing too much paint to build up. So that was my sort of primer layer. So I'll just go ahead and do that all over. Oops. Bit off the rim of the jar. Be a bit careful on the edge. I don't want to push towards the edge too much as well, so trying to be a bit ginger about it, because this first layer will actually seal the edge of the tape. And it's quite a good trick if you're using, if you're a bit worried, you know, if you're just building up to feeling confident about it, is I could actually have painted this with black. Paint it with black paint. That would seal the edge of the tape, and then when you paint with white, you get a really nice crisp line. Obviously, you've then got black over white, and you may get things peeping through, so I kind of like to feel comfortable that the tape is doing all the work. But it's quite a good tip, the idea of putting on the same colour as your base layer before you start putting on your accent colour like this. If you're doing it over wood, for example, so if you're doing a very heavy grained wood, as in it's very textured, it's quite a nice idea to put down a layer of, and I usually water it down a little bit, a layer of top coat, because that will fill the grain, seal the tape down, and then when you put your coat of paint down, it can't sneak under the tape. So there are times that I do that when something's, you know, a little bit important, that it comes out right. Maybe I've spent a lot of time on a design. I don't want to be there afterwards sort of picking around, I'm just watching for the paint building up around the edge of the tape there. I'll make it look prettier when I come to put the pearl on, but really what I'm going to take is a really smooth base layer. There's a few little lumps because my pots go to workshops and stuff. I just want to make sure there's no, that you clean out, literally clean out the edge of the tape. There isn't a build-up of paint there. So it's a bit more painstaking doing it this way, but I think you get a better effect than just throwing it on. When I've done it before and I've just thought, I'm going to roll it, I'm going to roll the whole lot. More tape has seeped underneath the, more paint has gone to the tape than I want. And that's because you're doing it too forcefully and too quickly. So I think it's better to get this first layer on carefully. As you go along, the tape's going to get sealed, and so you can then concentrate on making it look nice. And the flow of your paint and making it look smooth, and be confident that it's all sealed down. But this first one is just got to get it on the right direction first. I've gone off a bit of a tangent there. So I'd expect to do 2 coats of the pearl, because it's so translucent. It's beautiful, but it works best over a base layer. If I was using a darker metallic, I'd probably just go straight for the metallic on its own. When I do my drinks cabinets, they are 3 coats of bronze, or mixture of bronze. They're 3 coats, and I put them all down directly without any base layer. Smoothing is important because by your 3rd coat you're going to get more paint built up along the edge of the tape there, and you need to make sure you don't want to see a ridge where you've taken it. You want it to be nice and smooth if you can. But what you can do in between coats is you can use an acrylic sanding pad just to soften it off a little bit. So what we do on my workshops to keep it moving is the trusty hairdryer, because we only have 2.5, 3 hours, so I'll blast this. As soon as it's touch dry, I can go again with the next coats. That's how good Fusion is. So when it comes to other paints, by all means, all these techniques, try them out. Just try them out. If you don't want to put it on a piece of furniture, try it on a sample board and check it out, because, you know, I don't want you to have any major accidents on something that you really, you know, have slaved over. But hairdryer is a good way to speed it up. Back in a sec. Right, I'm going to go straight in with the pearl. The next coat, that's Fusion Mineral Paint Pearl. You could go straight in, you could go and do another coat of casement, which is the white that I was using. And you could do 2 coats of that and 1 coat of pearl as a sort of top coat. But because I know that sometimes it takes a little while to get a nice smooth effect with your metallics that you're happy with, I'd rather put 2 coats of this on. So it's just a choice, it's not a rule. So I'm just going to paint over this. Now that's quite nice and smooth. If I was worried about it, I'd get my synthetic sanding pad out and I'd just give it a little sand, but I'm quite happy with that because it's the first coat. As this builds up, I might decide to do that a little bit in between coats, but as it is, I'm just going to go straight in with this. Again, making sure it doesn't build up against the lines. I'm just going to, yeah, maybe 2 coats of white would have been better, but I'm not a massive user of pearl actually. I use the darker metallics a lot, so this is a bit trial and error for me as well. So, but by 2 coats of this, it should have built up enough. So, I'm not worried too much. What I'm doing with the metallic is stroking it in one direction because it has got a bit like velvet. It's got the sort of micro particles need to sort of lay down in the same direction for them to reflect nicely. So that's what I'm doing. It'll be a little bit different from the technique with the paint. I'll go in the same direction, but I still want to clean out those edges by the tape. I don't want a build-up of paint. At this point, I'm not worrying too much about where the lines converge, but on my last coat, what I might do is sort of try and go in different directions. I'll try and show you that when it comes to it. Right now, I'm just building up the layers, so. I'm trying to sort of lightly feather it where the 2 directions converge though, so you don't have one line completely overlapping that one. I don't want it to look too harsh. Way too much paint. Just going to smooth that some more. Trying to work out which ones I've painted. I don't use the hairdryer in my workshop on my own very often. I just leave it to dry and do something else, to be honest. But it is useful if you're in a rush. I didn't talk much about the brush strokes when I was brushing my paint on, but that's because I was concentrating. So if you do want to know a bit more about the sort of the brushes I use, the way that I brush, that's for another video. Just this is really focusing on actually the technique of the masking tape. So you see if it's catching the light a bit now. So we carry on. I'm just hoping it's not before coats, but we'll see. I'll tell you in a second. I think that's okay now. I think that is the last coat. So what I'll do on the last coat, this is just a personal thing that I do, because you've got two lines going, one going that way, one going that way, is that I'll show you. It's a bit hard with white, but hopefully you'll get the idea when you can see the way my hand moves. It's just a little thing that I do. I try and take it up to the middle and go the other way. So instead of overlapping, they converge. So that's just a little bit of something. It's not a major technique, but I just think it's quite nice, especially with the really heavily metallic colours like gold and bronze. You can see a really nice kind of a mitered corner, which is quite nice. So you can put your brush down and you can pull along. Put it at an angle, then pull it along. It's quite nice. Just making sure I'm getting full coverage there. I'm not quite convinced that I'm fully there yet. We'll see. Quite a nice one there. You can see the different directions. It's like when you mow the lawn and you get quite a nice effect. You can do what you like though. You could do everything down, everything across. It's definitely one of those techniques that you can play around with and make your own style. You know, there's people that I really admire in the masking tape world, and they do it completely differently to me. They've also got a lot more patience than I have. But there's so many different ways you can do this. little light sand, which is a good tip. If you have to put a lot of coats on to get a full coverage, like this one is, I don't know if you can see, but it's a little bit opaque, a little bit translucent still, so I'm going to take a synthetic pad, I'm going to give it a light sand, because what I don't want is a lot of build up, so I'm going to give it a little, I'm going to knock it back. And I think this is more relevant for something like Effusion Metallics, because they have got that texture in them. So sometimes I can see they're getting a bit too textured. So I just sort of knock it back a bit, smooth it down, ready for the next coat. Because what you don't want is a really gritty, thick layer. Yes, it's going to be a layer sitting on top. That people said to me in workshops before, they're like, oh, I can see it sitting on top. It's like, well, yeah, it does sit on top. I mean, top coat will bond that together and make it feel like it's one, but it will sit on top. What we don't want is a sort of a ridge or, to say, a layer obviously sitting there. So, especially on the edges of the tape, I'm going to give that a little sand. Don't use sandpaper though, make sure it's synthetic pad for this. Just get a nicer final finish really. Right, and I'm just going to tap cloth that off, get rid of that dust. Ready for the next coat. And hopefully the last. Okay, tape off time. So, I've taken quite a few coats. I don't usually work with pearl, so I probably will put 2 coats of casement down in future, but I think we got there in the end. Yeah, so ready to go. So when it comes to taking off tape, my biggest tip, let's just get this edging off as well first, is wait till it's dry, which you can obviously tell. It needs to be touch dry. I definitely wouldn't leave it too long. Don't leave it too long. If you're using Fusion like me, I've left it 2 or 3 days and found it really hard, almost like it's like cracking and crumbling. Not the paint attached to the surface, it's just harder. You can see I've almost got a solid surface now, and that makes it harder to pick up those edges. So don't leave it too long. Leave it when it's still curing, it's still not fully dried yet. The process of water coming out of the paint, the evaporation can take 2 to 3 weeks. So this is still malleable. So that's why we say treat furniture gently when you're when people first get it, because it's not fully cured yet. But it's touch dry, but you can still work with it. I mean, I can still stage this. I can put something on top of it, but I'm going to place it. I'm not going to drag it because it's obviously still it's a little softer than it will be. It'll be totally hard in 21 days. So that's it. I've got tape off the edges. So yes, I always take my tape off when the paint was dry. Never take it off when it's wet. A, I'd get in a mess. I just know what I'm like. But B, I also think that you get a crisper line when you're pulling it through drier paint, not completely dried paint, because obviously we're talking about it being fully cured, so it's still got a bit of flex in it, but it cuts better. When it's wet, it's got nothing to resist against the edge of the tape. So yeah, that's how I like to do it. So I'm just releasing all the edges for a good tape reveal. That's another tip. This isn't part of the workshop. No, actually it is. At the end we always do, everybody has to sit and have the tape reveal done. You're not allowed to take the tape off without us looking. So what you do is you go around and take all the tape off on the edges so that you can get hold of it. My cheeky tape reveal tip. Otherwise you're picking. So I'm just going to do the same here, she says, and I can't get hold of this one. There you go. What's going on there? There you go. Right, ready. Okay, So there is a tip. This isn't just me doing tape reveal and everybody has to watch at the end. There is a tip to how I pull the tape off at the end. I think it's good to be measured about it. Not put too much stress on your base layer of paint, or even the naked surface of wood that you've got to sort of pull the tape off. You know, don't put too much stress on that bottom surface. Bear in mind, I'm usually doing this immediately after I've finished painting. On a workshop, we've just dried the last coat with a hairdryer, and then we're testing the grip of the paint straight away. So it's good to be a little bit careful. If you waited 2 or 3 weeks and it was rock solid, yeah, fair enough. But sort of pulling tape off, that's not good. So what I tend to do is pull the tape, let's turn this a little bit, and I put it back on itself so that you get 2 sort of cutting edges. Now if there's only one cutting edge, I will actually pull it across the edge that I'm cutting, so I would pull it at a diagonal. But because it's 2 edges, I just pull it back across itself, and fairly slowly. Not slow, but slowly. But what I'll do is, if I start to get really high in the air like this, I'll bring it down, because I want control. I don't want to be like, because this paint, it is still, you know, it's still curing, it's fine. I don't want to overstress it. So I'll come back to that one, because that one's going in several different directions, so we'll do this one. It's quite nice if you can get off in a different direction, isn't it? So that one, I should have moved. There we go. So it's sort of gentle over the top of itself to get that cut, and not sort of grabbing at it really. I think it's quite important. All these little things add up to a happy result. One, two. And when you get to a point where you've practiced and practiced, made a million mistakes like I have, fixed lots of mistakes, this is a point where you can kind of go, not, oh, and I've done that a lot. And I'll share with you at some point some tips, so I can get them down for you, some tips to fix those mistakes, because it happens to all of us. You know, something bleeds, you didn't rub it enough, or there was a bit of an uneven surface and it's stuck underneath. Ways you can fix it without having to sand off the whole top and start again, because you don't need to go to that extent. I've got some little tips, because I've been there and I've done it. I've got some little tips for how you can fix it up and make it sound again without losing your whole pattern, so stay tuned for those. I'm going all the way across the middle here. Yeah. Just a tiny little bit there, just a little tiny bit. How satisfying is that though? If you've not done it before, wait till you do. Very satisfying and rather addictive too. So there you go. Finished effect. Get rid of a big bundle of masking tape. And there you go. So, hope that was useful, hope that was helpful. As I said, this is a sort of starting point, but you can see how simple but effective a design like that can be. We're not cutting into the tape too much, you don't have to put on lots of different sort of widths of tape. using the tape and it's just bringing stripes together but using that cross to sort of build out the chevron. So give it a bash. If you've got any questions, please feel free to message me or comment if you see the video, if you want to comment underneath it. I'd love to help. And if you've got any sort of specific things you'd like me to cover, I'd love to know about those too, because I'm plotting some more videos to come up after this one. So everything that you let me know about, I'll look to do something on. So yeah, thanks for joining me. Cheers.